The next Summer Olympic Games will be held in Tokyo, Japan in 2020. Unless Nikon or Sony or maybe even Fuji pull something out of the bag, then Canon gear will no doubt dominate as photographers wield whatever the latest iteration of Canon Super SLRs and lenses are. However, this has happened before, and it will happen again, and again, and again. The last time this happened was in 1964, which was a very important year in modern Japanese history. It was the year Japan reinvented herself in many ways. It represented a year for normalization of relationship with the rest of the world, following the era of the world wars. In fact, if you were born in 1964, you were referred to as Shinjirui, meaning a new person or new people. That is, you were the first generation born without a direct experience of war or the hardship that came after it. Canon was no exception in this great renaissance. In April, just in time for the Summer Olympics, Canon unveiled a magnificent new SLR, the Canon FX. With the FX, Canon also turned a new leaf with their lens mount system because it was the first camera to feature the legendary FL mount. The first three FL mount lenses were the 50mm 1.8, the 50mm 1.4, and this spectacular 58mm 1.2. The FL lens system may seem a little confusing at first because they may have up to 4 rings like this one does. The ring closest to the front of the lens is the preset aperture ring. It denotes the aperture setting that the diaphragm will close to when the shutter is released. The aperture options on the lens are 1.2 to 16. The lens diaphragm is always fully open and only closes to the selected aperture after the shutter is pressed, or the manual aperture ring is used to check the depth of field. That manual aperture ring is the second ring from the front. It's effectively a depth of field preview ring. The third ring, which is the largest of the lot, is the focusing ring. It is textured and contoured for fingers and has a distance scale and a depth of field scale. The fourth ring, closest to the camera body, is how the lens is attached and detached. Anti-clockwise rotation for detachment, clockwise rotation for attachment, both times ensuring to align the red dot. Looking at the front of the camera, you can see the self-timer lever, the synchro flash socket, the mirror lock lever, and the window for the inbuilt CDS light meter. This means that the light meter is not TTL, so you'd have to compensate for filters. Said light meter is on top of the camera, in between the accessory shoe and the rewind crank. It was designed to be powered by the classic and now mostly outlawed 625 Mercury battery, which goes in the compartment right to the side of the rewind crank and the light meter. See descriptions for alternative batteries. Once in, there is an on, off, and check dial to turn the light meter on or to check the battery voltage. I will do a full video soon on the light meter on this camera. On the other side, you can see the shutter speed dial with a choice of bulb to 1000. 1000, of course, means 1/1000th of a second. Lifting up the outer ring of the dial operates the DIN ASA film speed selector. Both DIN and ASA values are displayed. The shutter release button is threaded for buttons or cables and is surrounded by the lock lever. The shutter and the wind mechanism are locked when in the L position and operational at the A position. To the far right are the film advance lever and frame counter window. The frame counter is automatically reset when the door is opened and closed. Under the camera, you can see the tripod socket, film rewind release button, and the back cover opening key. Turning the key anti-clockwise opens the back door of the camera to load the film. With the rewind crank pulled up, the film cartridge is placed into the cartridge holder compartment. The film tip is fed through the take-up spool, ensuring the sprockets are engaged. The back door is then closed firmly and locked by turning the key clockwise. As usual, the film wind crank is advanced until the frame counter indicates the first frame, 0. Composing with this camera is via the Viewfinder. The Viewfinder is very simple with no exposure information at all. It has a split screen circle in the middle, which focuses by aligning the upper half of the image to the bottom half. With a 50mm lens, you're looking at 90% of the actual vertical scene and 93% of the horizontal. In other words, you will have more of the scene exposed onto the film than you can see in the Viewfinder, which of course is better than the other way around. With a 58mm lens, I think it's closer to 100%. There are some accessories for the Viewfinder which I have detailed in the descriptions if you're interested. When the film is done, or you want to rewind for any reason, press the rewind release button on the bottom of the camera and rewind with the crank. Flash can also be used via the sync socket only. The accessory shoe is cold. Okay, a couple of things that some may consider to be negatives about this camera. First, it's really heavy. The body is really heavy and the lens is heavy. To me, that's testament to really good build quality. The body is solid metal and the lens is metal and good quality dense glass. So it really is more dense than heavy. The second downside is that the light meter is not TTL, so compensation is needed while using filters. Some people also like to have information displayed in the Viewfinder so they don't need to keep taking their eyes off to check settings. The final one, of course, is the Mercury battery that is now outlawed in most parts of the world. However, there are alternatives that work just fine. Positives though, this camera has many. The lenses that were released with this camera, they're unbelievable to put it mildly. All 3 lenses are absolutely stunning. Because of the quality build, you're also likely to find this camera in near mint condition today. Many Olympus cameras from the same era that I found usually have a little dent on the edges from when they were dropped sometime in the past. I think this camera would fare better in such a drop. And the photos? Well, simply beautiful. Of course the lenses take all the credit for that, of course. They're sharp, clean, and very detailed, even towards the wider apertures. I even noticed a bit of a swirly bokeh thing going on, usually associated with lenses like the Helios 44-2. So it will be no surprise at all to anyone that this camera comes highly recommended by me. If not for its historical significance, then for its sheer quality. And until next time, Sitios, Altios, Fortios.